You are now tuned into the world famous
PODCORN Podcast.
Welcome.
PODCORN is sponsored by Audible. With over 100,000 audiobooks for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, visit www.audibletrial.com/podcorn for a free audiobook download just for podkernels like you.
Yeah, all right. Cool. Well, it just came out this week. This is Amy Reeder and Brandon Montclair. They created it. It's their baby. While we're getting the AV set up, how are you guys? How's your con been so far? Are you guys enjoying it? Yeah. Pretty much. You guys were kind of lackluster. I don't know. Are you guys enjoying your con? Yeah. There we go. Yeah, it is still pretty early. But yeah, so we have some giveaways. We've got variant covers for the first issue right here. Ask a question, I'll give you a comic. I've got 7 comics, so hopefully there's not. Well, hopefully there's more than 7 questions. Let me not say that.
Yeah, we got some posters and prints, and I've got enough for everybody. It looks like. So.
Yeah, so far. And then cool.
I don't know. I feel like we can just get into it. We'll have AV at some point.
Yeah, sure.
So. Tell us about Rocket Girl. What's it about for the people in the audience who don't know yet?
Yeah, well, it just came out this week, first issue, new ongoing series. But it's about DaYoung Johansson, who's a 15-year-old police officer from the future who goes back to 1986, New York City. But the twist is, everyone can hear me okay, or good?
I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Mom. The twist is the future she's from is actually 2013, but it has teen police officers, flying cars, jetpacks, and everything else. And the thing is, well, what happened in 1986 that she's going back to kind of investigate? That her future, her 2013, is very different than the one we live in. And the inspiration behind it was a lot of 80s science fiction movies, whether it was Akira or Back to the Future 2, Blade Runner. By this decade, we should have had flying cars and laser guns and everything else according to that. So it's the future. Where's my jetpack is kind of what Rocket Girl is all about, I think.
Yeah.
Is it hard sci-fi? Like, what's the tone of the book?
I think it's hard sci-fi. I would say so.
Well, it's not in the technical sense, like in the genre sense of hard sci-fi. It's a lot of adventure, and it's a lot of superhero-y stuff too. So
yeah. I mean, obviously.
There's time
both
travel.
Of us, we put most emphasis on the characters, so it's not so hard that it's all about the concept or anything like that. But yeah, and so it's a ton of fun. I don't know. Brandon gives me a lot of good material to draw. That's for sure. So
yeah, it's been a blast. So
yeah.
That's actually a good point. What's your working relationship like? Do you just write a script and it's done? Like, Amy, do you know what's going to happen at the end of the series? Like, what's your creative process?
Well, it's a little mixture of both. I mean, mostly it's that he's the writer and I'm the artist, but we're really close friends and we've known each other for a long time. And I think that does come through in the book, that we have a really good collaboration going. So he already kind of knows what I like. And, when he writes, he's thinking about what I can draw and stuff like that. But, we talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the book.
Sure.
We go back and forth on designs and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're neighbors too. So
so we meet all the time and talk about what we need to do. We have power breakfasts.
Yeah, not anymore. It's been a while since.
Yeah, we need to do another power breakfast.
Yeah. No, I live in the westernmost part of the East Village, and Amy lives in the easternmost part of the West Village. So we're actually very close. Yeah. So it's there's like actually Greenwich Village in between us, but
yeah.
All right, so
there's some pictures.
Excuse me, we got pictures. This is the first panel?
Yeah.
First issue? Mm-hmm. I used this on 2 panels I've done with Amy and Brandon because I like it so much. It's an homage to an 80s movie, is that right?
Yeah. Well, she's traveling through time in this picture, so I mean, the only thing I could picture traveling through time is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So it's very much that, like, I had to go and look at the previews of Bill and Ted, just to see if they could help me at all. And actually, what's funny is I looked back at Bill and Ted, and it's not as cool as this, but that's what I saw when I saw the movie. It's actually like straight lines instead of like jagged, like lightning bolts. Yeah. So actually this kind of brings to a point like what you were saying about the collaboration, because the first like 3 pages we kept going back and forth on it a lot. It was really hard to decide because Brandon believes strongly that when you have a comic book, you never like don't have the main character in it in the first few pages. And we were gonna have her introduced in page 3, but then it just felt like there was a lot that we had to fit in and everything. So we decided to have her like smack right at the beginning, at least just one panel to give people a taste before we brought them into a little bit of setup.
Yeah, and you want some balance. There's a lot going on. It's really a simple story, I hope, but it seems complicated, so you don't want to lose people too soon. And it's a first issue, and it's a new character, and it's a new series, so you don't have the benefit of working on, Amy's done some Batwoman, or I worked on some Batman or whatever. You don't have the benefit of all that continuity and familiarity where you can just start a Batman story and you don't have to explain too much because people know half the work is done because that's all the Batman stories that came before. So with Rocket Girl, it's like, you have to get it in. You want to really start with the action. You don't want to be too, boring, I guess, right, with setup. So the trick was that with a time travel story, you can kind of bounce around and do a lot of things. So, that helps also to be able to, you have excuses to do flashbacks because the flashbacks are in a totally different world. And it's funny because the flashbacks, because it's in the perspective of 1986, the flashbacks are actually from the future, 2013. But hopefully people follow along. They seem to. So, it's good. And like I said, it's simpler than it sounds explaining it. I hope.
I think so. I like it. This is almost the comic equivalent of a cold open, like when Breaking Bad starts and they just get right into something crazy happening, and then they go back and show you how it got set up. This is very similar, I feel.
Yeah, that's true.
I've got a lot of covers to show off.
Awesome.
We got this one, number 1. This is the one you'll find in stores. Essentially, it's not the variant or anything.
Yeah, and it just came out this week, so
it's another bold image.
Yeah, and it's sold out, right? So, but a lot of stores still have it, but there's a second print coming. We have some at the table. Mm-hmm. Some of the other retailers here have them. So,
we've got the number 2 cover, which is one of my favorites so far. And actually, this is the poster they're giving away.
Yeah, some of them,
They have 1 and 2 covers.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Because it's awesome.
Yeah,
we can tell a lot about that.
Yeah, actually.
We've got the...
I was going to say, you can sing out the whole thing, but
so Brandon thought, why don't we have a cover where like she's just hanging out or it's happy or something where it's not like action and stuff. And so like I literally made her hang out around a bunch of fire escapes in New York in the 80s. And originally I had this sketch where the helmet was facing away from her, and then Brandon remembered, like, we had designed her costume. She's like her mom's Korean and her dad's like, American Caucasian. And so her name is DaYoung, which is Korean, and I took Korean in college, so I know a little bit, but so I made her name as part of the design of her costume. So on the top, it says Da, but then I made a mirror image of it, and then on her chest it says Young, but I made a mirror image of it. So basically what I did here was I combined them so that it says her name on the cover.
That's really subtle. It's interesting.
Unless you're Korean, because Korean people spot it right away and say, and even if it's mirror
sometimes
image,
they do.
They seem to catch it right well on that cover, especially.
That one, we make it a little straightforward, but.
But Amy always said, and it's interesting just from an aesthetic, purely just her,
It's a great design element.
But she always said, Korean is, for some reason in her mind, always seemed
it looks
very
futuristic to me. Yeah.
It's a little more streamlined
yes,
than some of the other.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't have the image, but I want to talk a little bit about your process for this cover, Amy, because
Yeah.
I saw a sketch where you'd done all the perspective lines for the fire escape,
Yeah.
and it was like looking at math homework almost. Like it was
Yeah.
so complicated.
I was so basically with perspective and stuff, I don't know, like I drew her first and then I realized I hadn't figured out the background, so then I had to kind of go in and make a perspective grid on the computer and print it out and lightbox over it because I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But yeah, like when you draw perspective and one-point perspective for those artists out there, a big mistake that people make when they're amateurs is they let things go too long.
Yeah, to infinity, right?
Yeah, you don't really want to do that. You want to like squish things as much as you're humanly comfortable doing. And that fire escape above her, like also as it gets farther away from her, it gets thinner and thinner. And I actually err on the side of it getting thinner than it should because it kind of makes it feel like even more like there's a lot of depth. So,
And I can't imagine this was a happy accident, but I think you said it was, that you have the triangle from the far side fire escape ladders going up and the arch supports.
Yeah, it was a mistake, but yeah, the arch supports and the fire escape create like these little triangle patterns. So, but most of that's covered up in the design that we did, which was originally what I wanted to do too. I wanted it to look kind of like a VHS cover. And it took me a long time to figure out the best way to make it look like that. But Brandon and I were looking at images and stuff, and then he was like, "Oh, you should do the chrome lettering." And I'm like, "No, that's so stupid. That's so corny."
So good.
But it looked so good. Yeah, so then I was like, "No way I'm doing that, Brandon." I'm kind of stubborn. That's why it's really nice to work with Brandon because we're friends, so he doesn't get offended. But like...
You usually come around. So.
Yeah, I usually come around. So like I was home... and trying it out, and I was like, you know what? This actually looks pretty cool. So, it's got the whole desert sunrise thing going on in there. I was really happy with it, and I wanted it to be awesome, so I was really glad I was able to pull it off, and people seem to be reacting to that cover the most online, so...
Yeah, and the first kind of pass at the trade dress for that was too gaudy. It was like pink and blue, and it's like nice because it was 80s, but it was just too much.
It was too childish. I think part of it is that I was born in 1980, so I think of the 80s as like a bunch of kid stuff, you know? So.
And I think at least one person said, "Oh, it looks kind of 80s, kind of retro," and then they would read the description and find out, "Oh, it's supposed to," and that's really cool. Yeah, because you don't want it to be too retro. Like the book itself, I mean, it takes place 75% of it in 1986 in New York City.
Yeah.
But you can't go too ham-fisted with all that stuff.
Well, it was really important to us that, like, when we do the 80s, it's going to be genuine. It's not going to be like, oh, the 80s were so funny, ha ha ha. Like we're all in. And then when it's like the future, it's kind of like an 80s future, but it's not going to look like bad special effects. It's going to feel really real and cool.
More covers. Like
Yes.
the face here is great.
Yeah, thank you. This will be the cover to issue 3.
Yeah, it's actually the first finished image.
It is, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I had just barely designed the character, and so I really wanted to do a close-up because I really like to do close-ups of characters. If you've seen my old work, I have a Batwoman close-up and a Supergirl close-up and a Madame Xanadu close-up, and those are like the best known of the ones that I've done of those characters. So, it's just nice because I like fleshing people out down to the atom, you know? And so, I don't know, it's just a fun little intense close-up of her.
And
so.
this next cover is it's still kind of a close-up, but it's much more action-packed. Like, there's stuff going on.
Yeah, we wanted to do an action cover, and I think I went a little crazy with the rendering of this. Maybe I was, being too much of a fan of Sean Murphy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, she's in, a subway tunnel, running away from some bad guys who are also from the future and went back in time. So it was a lot of fun, and you'll get to find out what that's all about later on. But as you'll see, this whole thing is also very New York. It's very 80s, and it's also very New York, because we're playing on that whole idea that people miss the 80s in New York.
Yeah, so the first issue has a lot of Times Square. This is from issue 4. It's the subway. It's like, we really try to hit a lot of bases.
Yeah.
Issue 2 has the Statue of Liberty, which at the time was under all kind of scaffolding. So, a lot of kind of visually interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, Amy's first instincts are in action because she didn't grow up reading Superman and Spider-Man and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like a challenge, and it's great to see Amy do an amazing job like she did on this cover. But also she has a bit of an advantage in a way because it's like, you do things differently. It's always different and fresh. It's not the same way because people who draw that kind of flying action cover every month for 20 years, it's like, how many different ways can you do it? So Amy's, kind of put all of it on one cover, and it looked great.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a hard time actually imitating, so I just have to generate things from scratch.
Which is hard, but it gives it a different look.
So, yeah.
How do you guys choose covers? Like, is this going to be a gatefold, like front and back?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not a gatefold, it'll be front cover, back cover.
Yeah, that's
right.
Oh, I don't know what that means, so I was like, yeah, sure.
Gatefold is when it folds out from the book.
Yeah.
But,
Oh, cool,
so-
maybe.
yeah.
How did you guys, how do you choose covers? Do you just sit down and go what would be cool for this month? Like, what represents this comic the best?
Well, we did I did several sketches, and we kind of talked back and forth on it. In fact, there's a few sketches that we haven't used yet, and we'll probably use for future issues.
Yeah, there's a super nice one on the Chrysler building.
Yeah.
Where we're going to put it.
Yeah. But this one actually, we knew that we wanted to have something. This was actually for a Kickstarter reward because we originally funded this through Kickstarter. So we made these prints that came with everybody's book that has a front and back, and so it's got her on the front facing us in the 80s in Times Square, which. By the way, the building there, that's what that building used to look like before it was covered up by a bunch of LCD screens. So there's something underneath that. And I read into the history, and the facade of it was changed in, I think, the 60s. And before that, it looked super old. It was made in 1901 or something. So I know way too much about Times Square. But yeah, and then and on the other side, it's the futuristic version. And if you can see near the bottom of the image, it's got that same building. So it wasn't covered up, they just kind of built up. So yeah, I have all these crazy theories about the future of New York if we had gotten that futuristic about it. But yeah, so we wanted to do this front and back thing specifically for this, and then we decided to make it cover 5.
Which ends the first arc, so
Yeah, and I wanted to showcase her police lights going off, so that's also another reason why we specifically made this cover.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of like the 5th issue. That's the last issue of the arc, and there's a big thing that happens in it and stuff. So it was just kind of good to just kind of just have her right there landing in New York.
And maybe it doesn't even need to be said because it's so obvious. But yeah, it's you're dealing with a book from 2 different time streams. We'll do one in the past, one in the future, one from the front, one from behind. So so literally it's not like a 3D cover, but it kind of is, right? It's you have the front and back.
I like
if you spin it real fast. Maybe,
maybe if you spin it, she'll have a butt on the front of her or something.
I like that her police lights look kind of like butterfly wings.
Yeah, I felt like that too. Yeah, they kind of look like wings. That was a little bit intentional.
We're going to get into some interior pages, but for those of you who haven't read it, we're not going to spoil anything for you. We're just going to show you some cool stuff. And for those of you who've just come in, we've got giveaways. We're giving away the comic if you ask questions. We've got print and posters. Mm-hmm. So be thinking while we're talking, and then we're going to start calling on you. It's like being in school. So the lettering on this, you're hand lettering all the sound effects?
Yeah. Well, hand in the sense that it's on the computer, but I'm drawing them. So that because I come from sort of more of a manga background, and I really do like drawn looking balloons.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. It's a lot of work though. I don't know. It's really silly that I do it, but it's what I prefer. Yeah.
Brandon, can you talk a little bit about what's happening here? Just giving people the broad strokes.
Yeah, well, that's right in the beginning, and it's back in 1986. There's scientists at Quantum Mechanics who are about to invent something they don't even know. They've been working on it, but they don't really know the implications. And it's according to DaYoung's future, it's what changed everything and what wasn't supposed to be. So she can kind of know when it all started was this moment in time when they activated the Q engine. It's a Quantum Mechanics device kind of. And Quantum Mechanics is just like a mega corporation that does everything. And so it happens. They thought they would take some tests, but instead it explodes, and out from the smoke comes a DaYoung Johansson from the future trying to put them all under arrest right off the bat, and then she faints, and it's great. I mean, she's a great character. I love writing her. I hope she's a great character. Other people think. But no, because she thinks she can do it all like a teenager, right? So that's her whole point. She's, why can't I go back and give people orders and arrest people and do everything else? I'm a police officer. I've earned it. Because even if just the attitude, the chip on her shoulder.
Yeah.
You guys said something really interesting about her at San Diego in that, teenagers tend to be very pure about what they're into.
Yeah, some of it, like I said, reading all the reviews, which have been great. A lot of them say, "Oh, well, why are the police 15 years old?" And we've talked about that, and that kind of gets explained within the story. But since it's not a secret, it's exactly that. 15-year-olds or teenagers, they still see the world as black and white and right or wrong. They can be very idealistic. So anyone who was kind of around or just knows about 80s New York City was very corrupt, and the police department and everything else. So in her timeline, someone had the bright idea to start hiring teenagers because they know right and wrong. They don't see shades of gray and everything else. But that really is what the whole book is about, can she keep that kind of, black and white outlook on life, or do things get complicated? And that's growing up. You have to make choices and really compromises. And can she be this hard-nosed kid who goes back in time and arrests people, or does she start to grow up and say, well, things aren't as simple as they think? But
no, totally. That's what you just said it.
Here's
I got nothing to say about this because this is just the amazing spread.
This is all Amy.
Thank you.
I like images, personally I like images of flying in comics when they actually get at the joy of being able to just move however you want, almost like swimming. And this, her just kind of backflipping into the air and falling in. It's like a Rocketeer move almost.
Yeah.
And I will say one thing, and then Amy can say a lot, I promise. All the spreads in Rocket Girl are done old Marvel style plot first, where it's whenever you see a spread, it's like an action scene. I say, Amy, start here and go there, and maybe one or two things have to happen. But then she does it, and then I put in the usually captioned dialogue after the fact.
Yeah. So which really helps because one thing that I really believe strongly in when you're drawing sequential art is that you want the pages, the action to lead into each panel and stuff. And it's way easier to do that when you don't have to worry about being loyal to somebody's script. So as you can see, the whole motion is very much intentional of where the panels are placed and then where she's going, so that it can kind of create a movement. I really love Osamu Tezuka because, and you'll see in his comics that he does that. Everything has so much of a direction.
Momentum almost.
Yeah. Every single panel is just psh, 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 and he intentionally places things so that they'll lead into each other. So that was really cool that you gave me a chance to do that, because then I got to just let her relax a little bit and kind of stop time a little bit, which is great because there's so much that goes on in these issues. Brandon he wants people's money to be worth it, so he puts a lot in there. So this, and also if you read it, the cop scene was another one where I could play around a lot with direction because I was in control of what was going to happen next.
Yeah, you'll have to buy the book to see the cop scene. That's not in my slides. But I like the bottom panel is a good example of what you guys mean when you're saying you're going for the real 80s, or not making fun of it, not doing an ironic riff, but just being this is the 80s, it was a nice time.
Yeah.
In the foreground, all the way to the right, that's Mets jacket. Mets won the World Series in '86. Everybody wore a Mets jacket that summer.
Yeah, he had to inform me of that because I hate sports, so I don't know. That whole bottom panel took me forever, by the way. So if you're an artist, don't feel bad. That took me, I think it took me 3 days to draw and then a day to color it. Because I was going through all this research to figure out exactly what the ads were. I mean, it's not all accurate, but basically but there's a lot. It's pretty close. That Panasonic ad is great because it literally said, just slightly ahead of our time. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, it was just so awesome. And there's like a Howard Johnson's that used to be there and all this stuff. So, yeah, you know, I probably will not take that much time on a future panel because it is ongoing, but it was great that I got a chance to do that for the first issue.
And a couple of shout-outs to 1986 or 80s comics in the first panel, too.
Oh, that's right, yeah, because Brandon had me draw 3 issues. One's from Dark Knight Returns in the bottom left of the first panel, and then higher up there's a Starstruck and a Mage comic.
This is a
that are flying through the air.
conversation I'll have with Dave at one time. Everyone reads Dark Knight Returns. I know Dave's spoken about it a lot, but maybe nobody else here in the room is going to be interested. But Dark Knight Returns #3 is actually the greatest single issue ever written. No one ever thinks of it as single issues. It's like The Watchmen is at 8 with Dr. Manhattan on Mars.
Yeah.
It's like that is one of the greatest single issues, and people talk about it. But if you just pull out Dark Knight #3 and just read that without the rest of it, it's an amazing story. It's unbelievable. So
I'm glad, Amy, you mentioned that you colored it as well, because I'm going to show the credits page to the first issue. It's a little hard to read on a big screen, but I mean, it's just you two. Like, you're the creative team.
It's pretty simple, yeah. We thought about like saying what all we did, you know, but yeah, no. I mean, Brandon is the writer, and he handles a lot of. Well, he was my editor before this, like back when I was working on Madame Xanadu. So he's definitely got an editor hand and does a lot of the business side of things and stuff, and as well as just, you know, working with me on everything. And then I'm penciling, inking, and coloring it and lettering it, and I designed all of the pages and the logo and stuff like that. So
and that's actually isolates the DaYoung. We were talking about the Korean characters.
Yeah, that's right. So those are the actual letters, the 2 syllables. So the top is Da, and then the bottom is Young. So.
Any questions? You were first.
The question was, did Bubblegum Crisis influence your design?
Unfortunately, no, but I really did want it to look, kind of like anime.
And I can tell you some of the other 80s manga that you were reading. It was Akira.
I read Akira.
Also Appleseed, right?
Yeah, I've been looking at Appleseed and so
same time period as Bubblegum Crisis.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, when I was designing her, I was thinking a little bit about Mega Man, but you know,
that's also classic 80s.
Yes.
And incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But that the Bubblegum Crisis is a really good touch point, actually, because that's something else that's like glorying in the 80s.
Sure.
I mean, it is probably the most 80s anime I've seen, and it's wonderful.
I gotta look at it. I've missed even with anime. I've missed a lot of stuff. I mostly read like just the manga, and it was usually the stuff for like women. So yeah, I gotta read up.
I'll have to send you a YouTube of a music video, and it will blow your mind.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Like what? Like one of those.
It's
like
the opening to the series, but it's like full on like J-rock.
I thought you meant like the fan music videos.
Oh no.
I'm like, you're a real fan.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
You can come up and grab a
book. Oh yeah,
book
come and get a book.
Oh yeah.
I didn't bring a pen. Did you bring a pen?
Yeah.
I've got a regular pen.
A Sharpie? You can sign it. Great.
Oh, I've had a Sharpie.
Yeah, we'll sign it for it too.
Go for it, man.
The question was, how did you get involved with Image?
Image. Well, we just contacted them. Yeah, like last year we did Halloween Eve with them, you know, I was already working at DC and Vertigo, and so I think they knew who I was, and I knew a writer. And this is, just so you know, we're going to give some people these prints, and they were exclusive to the Kickstarter, but we had a few extras, so they're sneaky little things. Yeah, no problem. Do you have a lid?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to close Sharpies. So we just knew one of the writers there, and then asked if we could get the contact information, and asked them, and they were cool with it.
Yeah, Halloween came together like lightning fast. So Image was very cool, and took us on faith. Even, you know, I mean, obviously Amy's done a lot of work. I've done a little bit, but on faith that we'd get it together and out on time, because it was like, oh, it's Halloween. It can't come out in November. It has to come out in October.
The timing was a little harder, but with Rocket Girl, we had more time to plan. But yeah, they were behind us 100%, and you might have noticed, like, since then they've been really supportive of promoting the book, which we really appreciate. So
Yeah, I work at Image, and I back the Kickstarter.
Yeah,
so like,
so
I'm
cool.
into it. You have a question?
The question was, will you ever bring in other creators to work on the book?
Good question. We'll see. I mean, there's a thank you. There's a possibility that I might seek help with colors. But right now we're kind of like, we kind of feel like it's part of the look of the book. So yeah, and it's possible like down the road if we decide that we really want to make it like right now it's a monthly book. Thanks. It's a monthly book, and we're gonna have breaks in between issues. If we find that like we want to do more than that, we might have other artists on it and stuff like that.
Something you might see it on first is actually Halloween Eve too. We're thinking about.
Yeah, we've been thinking about doing that with Halloween Eve. Is inviting other artists on to tell the story, because we really feel like we want to continue that at least as a seasonal thing each year. So
Halloween each year, or would there be like Christmas Eve?
Yeah,
Eve?
we were even thinking about that, but in general, at least probably Halloween.
Maybe
Christmas Eve.
maybe Rock Girl 3 should have a Christmas Eve backup feature in December's copy.
Yeah, I want Valentine's Eve.
Oh my
It's the
Come up
13th.
and get your issue. And you had a question?
The question was, does DaYoung's mission come from the police or from her own impetuousness?
That's something that'll be revealed. It's coming through. It's important why she goes back and sends back, because, and this is something Amy's talked about before and I've talked about before. It's they have a sense of right and wrong, but teens are so easily manipulated also. So that's so was it really just because police were corrupt and it's a great idea to put teens in, because it's and that becomes a mystery. And one of the things that I'm really very conscious about, it really is, it's not a futuristic dystopia, it's a utopia. It's a perfect world. And a lot of people say that's what happened to New York City. You can walk through Times Square now. I used to work at DC Comics, and I lived down by Union Square. When I was a little kid, my father said, you can go anywhere you want, but you can't take the subway down to Union Square. Now I used to walk home through Times Square, through the Garment District and everything else, to go home. And it's like, is the city better or worse? And Amy talks about all the people all the time, right, who complain, right? It's not
They like it back then. They think it's not as genuine now.
So one of the real things is it a bad thing what this huge corporation did? That's a legitimate question, and kind of what prompts DaYoung's thought process is. And it's a little bit of in that first issue. There's a scene where, if you've read it, and it's not spoiling it, it's like her commissioner, who's only 13 years old, right, who says, what's right and wrong anyway? Like, he almost has a better sense. And she just says, no, what's right is right, and you leave it at that. And is life really that simple? And should it be or not? That's what the story's all about.
And isn't that character great, by the way? Like Commissioner Gomez.
Yeah. We don't have any pictures of him.
No, I should have brought some. He's amazing.
Which is Commissioner Gordon. That's Batman the thing. But he's got he's trying to grow a mustache, but he's not doing too good a job. He's got huge glasses, even though it's the future. But what Amy just added in, which is hilarious. I said, he can't really fit into his clothes. His mom would have bought him something that he could kind of grow into. But just the belt, it's like just a little detail, right? The belt, it's like it's almost down to his knee, the loop of it, because it's like, that belt doesn't fit, none of the pants fit, so it's like such a big belt tied, and then the excess, the slack, whatever it be, like I said, almost down to his knee, because he's just such a skinny little 110-pound kid. Yeah.
Well, there's some things that I'm worse at, but what I'm better at is knowing clothing. I like to sew and stuff, so yeah.
You had a follow-up?
The question was, will DaYoung encounter any racial tension in 1986?
You tell it, Brandon. You're the writer.
It was important. Part of the reason is just the simple reason. I try not to get too political about it, but there's not a lot. There's obviously not a lot of diversity, even with female characters or characters of color. To me, like, even if you don't want to be political about it, it's just good business to kind of do something different. So like I said, so not to go too much down that road. But one of the things I did, and I don't know, maybe it'll get me in trouble, but all of the characters from the future are multiracial. So, and I said, it's a different world, so hopefully that's a good thing. Again, part of the utopia aspect of it.
And so, you had a question?
The question was, Amy, was this your idea?
Oh, no. Actually, it's not. No, it was really just both of us. And we came up with it during New York Comic Con last year.
Oh, is that what it was? No, it was after that, I think.
No, because I remember on the cab ride home on Sunday that we were talking about the character itself and what we wanted to do with her. And so like maybe at some point we were walking around in my neighborhood and that like we were right by Papaya Dog on 6th Avenue and 4th Street and we were walking over that crazy puddle and that's when you said Rocket Girl. I know where we were.
There you go.
Yeah.
She really does remember. That's amazing.
Yeah, I hate that puddle. But anyway, but it's like permanent year round. But yeah, so like, so yeah, he came up. He was like just mentioning titles. He was like joking about it. That you shouldn't just do something by a title, and he said Rocket Girl, and I was like, no, what's Rocket Girl? And he's like, no, I just made it up. The point is, it shouldn't just be a title. And I was like, no, we have to do Rocket Girl.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly how I said it, but it was something like, the idea like, Batman, Spider-Man, say, well, you can't just do a book called Rocket Girl and not have it be about anything, and, just making up...
Yeah.
And, a million things have been called Rocket Girl before, right? So it's like, you do a Google search of Rocket Girl, you find a lot of interesting things. But it was just like, but we want it to be basic also, really. Like I said, it's not a superhero book, but some elements are. And even like her name is, some of the things that happen.
Follow-up question. How do you settle conflicts?
Thunderdome.
It was mostly fishy.
Yeah, to be honest, we disagree a lot, but I mean, we don't get angry about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was mostly Brandon that came up with the concept. Like that whole idea of the future in the 80s and this being, the future being now and all this crazy stuff, that was all Brandon.
But one of the reasons, that we mesh well, and like I said, and that I'm a good writer for artists sometimes, because I haven't done that much writing, but I've worked with Amy, who's great. I worked with Shane Davis. I worked with Michael Kaluta and Simon Bisley. It's like, it's something that even great writers do, and even writer artists sometimes. You have to make the artist come first. It's like, Dave showed the credits before it's writer, and Amy does 90% of it, but even if she was just the penciler, it's like so important to comics. And they used to always say that every interview, well, it's all the artist comes first, and you should write for the artist. I don't think it happens as much now as it used to. And so I'm really writing this for Amy and what she wants to do, and I own it 100%, and I love all the characters, and I love everything I do on it. But I think that we don't have too much conflict because it's not, I will step aside if it's something, design-oriented or even character-oriented. I mean, I should take her advice. So.
Come on up.
Yeah.
You in the red.
Can you describe your working relationship in greater detail?
It's mostly just script and art, but because we know each other so well, we've talked back and forth about certain things. And as he said earlier, like the double page spreads are all where he kind of just gives me a general, this is where it starts, this is where it ends, you figure it out. And then he adds script later.
Are you free to change anything?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I mean, not like way different because I'm pretty happy with it usually, but I'm trying to think what I've changed.
There's something in the first issue. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah, it is hard to think of what it would be, but yeah, I mean, sometimes I think that things would work better another way, but in general, I tend to think in a box. So when somebody gives me a box, I figure it out. You know what I mean? Like I make the box work.
And just process it. Any artist will rough it out first and kind of do thumbnails. And if you stop by our table, we have some copies of the Halloween Eve where it does behind the scenes with my script on one side and then her layout. So I'll see all the layouts and we'll talk about them. But I used to do that when Matt Wagner was writing Madame Xanadu and Amy would turn in layouts. So that's kind of like always been our working relationship.
Yeah.
Does Brandon give you art ideas?
Oh, yeah, totally. Actually, I'll say, like, I kind of feel like Brandon comes up with more ideas about what to do with my art than me to do stuff with your script. I really feel like he comes up with a lot of good things. I mean, just like that cover we were saying where you flip the helmet around. Like, he always has really cool ideas that we could do, So, yeah. So.
You.
Sorry, what was that? Sorry.
How's the setting of New York going to influence the characters?
Go for it. You're the writer.
Well, I think the art on New York that's where most of the effort goes into, right? But it's very much a New York story. I've lived here my whole life. Amy lives here now. It's a character in the story. I mean, the reason we set it in 1986 in New York is because you can do so much with it. It's New York's always been a melting pot, but it was technologically kind of close-knit enough, as far as the world. It's fun putting people on, not having cell phones in the stories, things that you could do with that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, the city plays a huge part, but to me, it's a character which you hear a lot. But I mean, that's down to Amy. It's like it's easy to write 1986 New York and say, hey, this was cool in 1986. Draw it, and it's like the old thing, like write a script like, oh, a double-page spread of Napoleon fighting the British. It's like, yeah, it'll take a minute to write. It'll take a week to draw. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think. I think the character. I mean, in a lot of ways, we're kind of the same as we were in the '80s. We just kind of have different tech and sometimes different wordage and different clothing and stuff. I mean, there's a little bit informing it, but really the big difference isn't so much like the characters aren't so much completely informed by the '80s as much as that they're more natural, whereas this future is this kind of cold place where teenagers are cops, you know what I mean? So the real thing that really informs it is that the 80s kind of represent just humanity and the fact that we can be children and we can lay back and have fun because of, how we live our lives and stuff. And we do that even today, and, we don't have this weird society where we don't even see each other because we're all in our flying vehicles and stuff like that. So
yeah, and you've made the point briefly, but it's really true. Even if this were set in medieval times, you do a historical piece, it's usually supposed to be reflective about what's happening today. And even though most of Rocket Girl takes place in 1986, it really is about today. That's fiction.
Yeah.
Cool. Come on up. We've got one last variant for you. You in the New York Comic Con shirt?
How did you come up with DaYoung's name?
She's real.
Yeah, I have a friend. And actually she was my intern for a little while. Because she was a student at SVA. Her name's DaYoung. But yeah, so she's just a friend of mine. So we're like, hey, that's a cool name, kind of.
Yeah. I don't want to get people nervous. There's,
Yeah.
When you see the solicitation for the 5th issue, the title's Only the Good, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And you in the black shirt? How often do we meet?
Oh, gosh, we see each other, like, all the time. I mean, we hang out, we're already friends, so, I mean, we hang out, like, probably 3 times a week. It's pretty insane. He's my best friend, so, and we're neighbors, so it's pretty easy. And his daughter's also really adorable. She's, like, 4, so, like, I hang out with her a lot, too, so we're almost like family.
Yeah, New York's a walking city, too, so it's like, we're 15 minutes maybe away from each other, but meet somewhere in between,
Yeah.
But it's a lot. I mean, it's an advantage. A lot of people have kind of clocked to, hey, there's a good fidelity between writing and art in here. We work at it. We work at it together. It's good that you're friends. You don't have to be friends. You shouldn't. I guess if you hated somebody, you can't do it. But a lot of effort goes into playing to each other's strengths.
Yeah.
Come on up for a poster. In the back.
Does Image direct the content in any way?
Well, Image pretty much doesn't have editors. It depends on the book, I think.
Some people freelance editors, right? David might be able to do that.
I'm basically the only editor Image has on staff.
You found some mistakes in Rocket Girl.
Yeah, so that, in that sense, yeah, he'll...
Yeah, but like that's as close as we come to giving notes. Like we would never say like, hey, you should do a story about like 1985, because I mean they're a comic. We're just here to put it out.
And like I said, having worked as an editor, I worked at Vertigo, which is kind of, it's not hands-off, but it was more hands-off than working at DC, which I worked at for a little bit. But Image, you get to do your own thing, and you have to be able to do your own thing, which is tough. But some people hire freelance editors. Yeah. They like it. We don't.
Yeah.
You have a question? Come on up and get a poster.
I just want to make sure I can mention and stuff that we have like a really awesome Rocket Girl cosplayer in the front. I think you should show people your costume, please, because it's pretty awesome.
She has a ray gun too.
Yeah. That ray gun that looks like a pointed men's shaver is because Amy's version of a ray gun looks exactly like
it looks like a shaver.
I wish.
Watch out.
I wish we had an editor to say, Amy, why don't you draw that gun so it doesn't look like a...
the gun looked like a lot of other things, and so I figured shaver was probably the best option.
You have a question.
Oh yes, you gotta choose, sorry.
Oh.
How closely will you be referencing actual 1986 historical events?
Yeah, it's most updated, but it is a balance, right?
Yeah, like we definitely aren't checking the weather or anything like that. There are historical contexts that we put in, like Brandon mentioned before. Like we have a scene with Statue of Liberty when it still has scaffolding up.
Geraldo's an issue too.
Geraldo's in it. Yeah, like I don't know. There's certain things like that, or like Brandon had me draw this scene that's looking down 6th Avenue from 4th Street, and so I looked up what the IFC theater used to be, and I didn't realize it was the Waverly Theater where they used to play. Like that was like the center of where they used to play Rocky Horror Picture Show. So I mean, like yeah. So we do a little research here and there. I mean, but it's a mixture. I think it's wise not to be totally obsessive about it because in the end, it's just people want a good comic and you got to get it out there too. But yeah, so it's a little mixture of
It's
it.
a good point about seasonal things. Like we did like Halloween Eve, but I think all of like 2 panels are actually outside of the store, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, everything, and this takes place in the summer very consciously. So, but yeah, it's always nice. Like yeah, everything's always in the spring and the summer in comics. Like, whenever the snow and fall and stuff like that. You don't always see that in monthly comics working into the rotation. But, yeah.
People like snow in monthly comics, so you can just do that all white panel like John Byrne.
But that's only like when they're up. That's
do
only,
that.
yeah. That's only like when they're up in the North Pole, though.
Yeah. You have a question? Buffy shirt?
What is your inspiration for the look of the alternate future?
Since the future is kind of like an 80s inspired future.
Well, people don't know that. Yeah, you should say that's.
Yeah,
that's the.
it's like supposed to kind of look 80s. Like not all of it, but like there's like cars that look like they could be cool in the 80s and stuff like that. So yeah, like I use a lot of neon for the future, which is kind of hard because neon doesn't usually print as neon. Especially like I'm using a lot of neon blue. That's kind of like my main color glow is this Quantum Mechanics logo that shines blue everywhere because it kind of makes it feel a little unnatural. In the 80s, what I noticed is people don't wear nearly as much black as we do now. Like there's a lot more color that people wear and goofy things that they do. So there's a lot more color in that sense for sure.
And I don't mean the hard sell, but like if ever you bought something physical copy and digital, it's like Rocket Girl digital is like it's like a different experience. It's amazing, And I don't buy hardly anything digital, but it's just because of all the color and backlit on your screen, it looks really great.
And I should mention like this cover, because it was supposed to be such an 80s cover. Like they like to do like a lot of pink and blue highlights on things, like that's really 80s. So I specifically did that because of it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Actually, I have a question. You mentioned people don't wear black as much, and that made me wonder, is the Cold War going to matter at all in Rocket Girl? Because
not in the first arc, right? But,
all right.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's so much you want to do.
Thanks for all the ideas, by the way, guys.
No, I mean, I've actually thought about it, and we don't get that global, but no, because I mean, I was a little kid, a few years older than Amy, in the 80s. You're you were terrified as a little kid of the Russians, right? And like, Red Dawn was real, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. So, that was such a part of the world. I mean, not in the first arc, but down the road.
I was scared too.
Yeah, well, I think the equivalent for people maybe 10 years younger than me was Osama bin Laden in 9/11.
Yeah.
It's like my sister is younger than me by about 10 years, and a little more than 10 years younger than me. And she, it's like that was Darth Vader for her. I don't want to be a downer, but
questions? Green shirt?
Will pre- and post-9/11 ideologies be present in the story?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I lived here and I have family here, through 9/11, and there's a specific point where I say, I show the Twin Towers, but I don't try to get too much into it, but that's just personal. But yeah, I mean, it is a different world and how the world changed, and this New York City skyline is, for people who live here especially, I mean, it's world famous, right? But if you live here, if you come out of a bar and you don't know which way you're facing, you see the Empire State Building, you see a landmark, that's kind of it. I lived for 2 years in Pasadena while my wife was in school, and if you ever get lost, the mountains are north, and it's kind of. But in New York City, it's like, the Twin Towers are that way and everything else. So it's your world changes when that changes. But everything changes. So.
Yeah, and I grew up in Georgia, like small town Georgia. And New York was the city from the movies. It was like the ultimate city in the world, and it's like you're dead on with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Come up and get a poster.
Yeah.
Please.
Go for it.
Does the average person believe DaYoung when she says she's from the future?
Yeah, well,
Well, the interesting thing, I mean, like, it does sound kind of out of this world, but she is in a jetpack. So that's like kind of the thing is it's kind of easy to believe when she has all this technology that you can't explain. So that's kind of like what we're going with on some of that.
It evolves from it, because why would you believe it's just... So is it a hoax? Is something going on? And then actually issue 2 just happens to be a lot about that, where it's the city responding to Rocket Girl. And that's kind of the superhero issue, right? Where it's, the classic, not to take a movie reference for a comic book, but that scene in Superman where the original movie, right, where the helicopter is falling and Superman flies up and everything else and creates a sensation. So Rocket Girl is going to become a sensation in New York, and that's part of the story.
Yeah.
Cool. Green Jacket?
Can you say that again? What was that?
Will Rocket Girl ever visit the outer boroughs?
Oh, nice. Oh, you know what? That is really funny, because I don't know if I should pick on Brandon right now, but he's kind of... Oh, get your double-sided print. He's kind of a borough snob. I'm not, I promise, but he likes Manhattan a lot. So I actually think he should do some stuff out there.
I don't ever go there. I mean, it's,
In the
I live
back?
in Manhattan, so does she. So I don't know.
Well,
So Outer Boroughs,
I don't know
not in the first arc. There's been some thoughts. Technically, the Statue of Liberty is,
yeah.
that's a New York, New Jersey border.